Excelsior, dear viewers! Welcome to another exciting episode of Roll of a Tangent. My name is Nikita Zuev, and I am once again joined by my lovely co-hosts Robert Gibson and XJ. On our 31st episode, we shall speak about another classical author that most of you have heard about, Ernest Hemingway, a controversial yet beloved figure in the writing world. He published 7 novels, 6 short story collections, and 2 non-fiction works, all filled with his unmistakable, irresistibly romanticized style. Tonight's offering is a short story named The Snows of Kilimanjaro, which I will recount to you. It's a quite a, you know, as far as short stories go, it's a short one, anyways. And we do encourage you to read it before you listen to the podcast. But if you didn't, or if you need a reminder, here is the summary. Our narrative begins with 2 explorers in the middle of the African plains, trapped, waiting for a plane or some other means of transportation to arrive at their location. The main protagonist, with whom we spend most of the time, is a failed author named Harry. He is suffering from a deadly injury of his leg, the gangrene, entering its later stages. His lover, Helen, desperately tries everything within her power to help out, and is met with the bile and anger of the dying man. What follows is an exploration of Harry's life as he laments the infinite number of possibilities he has missed in his life. Unable to change any of it, tormented by his psyche, Harry drifts in and out of consciousness, which provides Hemingway many chances to explore all manner of memories and avenues of the human brain. We see what Harry considers triumphs, failings, high points, and devastating opportunities that were lost. Sex, violence, love, hate, and all in between unfold in front of us as Harry travels the length of his mind palace in the search of meaning right before the Reaper takes him. We end on a somber bait and switch as Harry deliriously dreams of being saved and Helen experiences the real life horror of seeing her beloved die. So, Robert, what did you think about the story?
It's quite a challenge to consider the story merely as a story rather than as a philosophy, because it's dominated by Hemingway's philosophy of what I take to be his philosophy of art for art's sake. That is to say, the only meaning that you can find in life is to do with following your art, following your literature, following your abilities, your creative abilities. He seems to have been unable to conceive of any other form of transcendence, if you can call it transcendence, other
Mm.
than what you can do with your creative ability. And the story is very, very autobiographical. It's eerily prescient in a way, because in the end, Hemingway himself actually killed himself because, well, it seems because he knew that he passed his best as an author, and he didn't know what else to do with himself. I don't know if I'm saying something controversial here, but that's what it seems to me. So we've got to try and consider this story as a story if we can, but also as a statement of what life is all about. And it's, for all the author's skill, it seems a pretty bleak one to me.
Yeah, and so what would you say is the conclusion then Hemingway had, that life is about art and art is all it is?
Seems to be that, yes, because although life, obviously, before the man in the story, for the protagonist, is about seeking pleasure as well, the the general mood seems to be of great dissatisfaction that he hasn't done more with his abilities than he had done. And
Mm.
of course, that's bound to be the case with anyone who tries to live purely for his own abilities. There's going to be, whatever you do, there's going to be no end of things that you haven't been able to do, and therefore the whole thing is bound to seem like it ends in failure.
Hmm. Perhaps this desperate fight for finding meaning within art robs oneself from other joys of life.
Yes,
Because that's the, at least to me, that's what I saw within the story. That Harry seemed to be so focused on how how much he had um, failed in the pursuit of the art that he remembers these memories and he finds them fondly, but in the end, he comes down to the um, conclusion that all of it was for naught because none of it is written down.
yeah,
Right. So the memory itself, the action itself, seems to be secondary to actually living in the moment, and
yes,
that
yes,
and that is a very interesting way of looking at it. Now I know Hemingway lived long before phones were a thing, but one of the interesting conclusions I came to it was I seem to have remembered a point in my life where I was at a concert. The concert was right before the wave of COVID truly hit, so it was one of those last moments where there was a lot of people in one room, and most were enjoying it like I was enjoying it, watching the crowd, watching the performers, enjoying the music. But there were a lot of people who were standing, especially at the front, who had their phones out and who were filming what was happening. Not watching, but filming it. Filming it to watch it again later. And to me, that seemed like a strange way to enjoy a concert. Because I at least I come to a concert in order to hear the music and see how the performance perform and feel the energy, feel the atmosphere, feel how the rest of the people are feeling. But these people chose to film this stuff so that they can enjoy it later at a much less um, full experience. Because if you
yeah,
film something, you're not filming everything that's around you. You're not doing the 360. You can't look left, you can't look right. Perhaps later in my lifetime, that will be a possibility. You will be able to film it that way. But at the time of this recording, it's a phone screen. That's all you see.
hmm.
So to
It's like,
me,
yeah,
mhm,
being a control freak, really wanting to control the experience and have it at your beck and call rather than just living it.
indeed. And to me, if Harry was alive, I think his, like in today's day and age, I think he would be complaining about that he doesn't have enough videos on his phone, to
Yeah,
sort of look back at these memories rather than having the memory, the atmosphere itself being enough.
yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
Harry doesn't strike me as that kind of man. I think he just comes across as very hedonistic, and he's just not very. It's not that he's not present in the moment. He's very present in the moment. He's just unable to put enough effort to push himself out of his procrastination, I feel, which is common in a lot of people. He thinks about what he wants to achieve a lot. He dreams about what he wants to achieve a lot, but he never breaks out of his the cycle that he finds himself in. He just keeps doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, I wouldn't call him
mm,
somebody who can't enjoy the moment, but just he's completely unable to stop himself from wallowing in the more physical whatever pleasures. I
mm,
wouldn't even call it pleasure, just like the rut that he's in. He just
mm,
Mm.
keeps traveling in it.
mm.
Well,
Well,
this
Hemingway
is a,
himself
oh.
was a boozer. He drank an absurd amounts, and
Hmm.
that didn't do his writing any good. So yeah, that's in tune with what XJ has just been saying.
For sure. Now we are in the moment when we meet Harry. We are at a point in his life when he knows he's dead, right? So that's another thing that we should consider. Perhaps he would not have these lamenting wallowings if he was at the prime, like he was days before the gangrene. But
Mm.
to me, at least, Harry represents stagnation. Represents someone who got something and he was satisfied with it, and he only stopped being satisfied with it when he realized this was it, right at the end, because it doesn't seem like he was particularly unhappy about having a very young and capable companion who also was very rich and who um, basically got him through this part of his life, the last parts of his life, as we found out, right? And he only seemed to have regressed into this pity and wallowing at the end. At least that's the way the story is framed. Yet there are certain interesting parts of it. For example, the terrible way that he treats Helen, even after he stops being verbally abusive towards her, he still treats her in a lot of ways as a lesser in his mind when he thinks about her. And this tells me that he is secretly angry at her because she has given him what he wanted, a good life. And now that he has this good life, he doesn't want to do the pursuits of arts, which are much harder to do if you're happy. Right? At least that's the way the story frames it, right? So because he's so happy, he's like, so why would I write anything? Why would I do anything? It's just let's have another martini.
Mm.
And if that's the case, right? If my assessment is true, probably that's why he hates her subconsciously, because she has robbed him of being an artist.
Mm.
I think I
Yeah.
think that's probably an over analysis of the man. I think he's a lot simpler than he seems. He's basically the type of guy, and you see them all the time. Between 20 to 30, having a midlife crisis, don't know where they are going, don't know what they want to do, and so they try to seek stimulus in the form of drink and women, and finding satisfaction in neither of them, they lash out. And guys like that are very they have a certain charm just because they are so
Feckless.
don't give a beat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are
Seriously.
drawn to that. I mean,
I mean,
yeah.
he seemed to me much older than Helen, and Helen is like in her mid 30s from the way it's uh, being portrayed, and it does constantly mention how it's his young girl that he's found, and that he's an older man. He doesn't seem to me like in his 20s, 30s. Seems to me like somebody in his 50s, 40s, 60s.
I think probably his 30s. You can sort of work it out. He's probably in the aftermath of World War One. He probably joined the army. He probably joined the army when he's like 18, 19, as all of them do. And this is probably around 10, 20 years after World War One, because they talked about the incredible inflation in Black Forest, in the hotel in the Black Forest where the proprietor went and hanged himself later on. So that's probably just before 1939.
How does a man in his 30s have three wives?
You marry a lot and you divorce a lot. I mean, I've met guys like that.
Yeah. Hemingway had 4 wives. So
Yeah.
Right, but he wasn't 30 by the time he had
mm,
4 wives.
no, I suppose not.
I mean, I think he's around he's in his 30s. You can probably go through the story and then work out the details. But I think I'm not far off. The time of that African trip is probably in the 1930s, before Hitler did his thing in Germany. Yeah.
What did you think of the story, actually?
I'm afraid to say that this isn't really my type of story.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um. Like
Why not?
the craftsmanship is superb. Hemingway is a master of his craft, and just the way it's described, the way the scene is described is to the point. He has what I call a um
So here's sorry that I interrupted you. Her husband had died when she was still a comparatively young woman, and for a while she had devoted herself to her two just grown children, who did not need her and were embarrassed having her about, to her stable of horses, to books, and to bottles. So if she's comparatively young to him, and she's had two children that were old enough, stop,
she was
so old enough.
comparatively young when her husband died.
I don't think you. I don't understand. I don't think you're listening to me. She is also compared as young later to Harry. So what I'm trying to tell you is she had two children. She got to the point where they were embarrassed by her, so they had to be not adolescents. They had to be teenagers at the least, right? And she is what's it called? She's described as sort of like aging towards being older, right? So I don't see how he could be 30.
So people marry young back then. So if we call her comparatively young, then we can probably assume she got married between 16 to 18. If her children are 16 years old, that makes her 32.
Which puts our guy
Okay, maybe
higher
35,
than
35, 36. I
all
don't
I'm
know.
saying
I
is
mean,
I
I'm
won.
not, okay, I'm not interested in arguing the point. Honestly, it's like a nerding out issue to me. It just seems to me like he's in his mid 30s. And you can probably work that out through his through the timeline. I would put maximum maybe 40. That would be a decent age, but I wouldn't call it 50. But anyway, just to go back to what I feel about the story. It's very so I think Hemingway has a great way of doing a lot with very little. His sentences are very well crafted. It conveys an incredible amount of information across in a beautiful way, with very little words. And probably does he write poetry? I think he does, right?
I haven't heard about it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he does. I'll look it up.
I'm not a literature guy, so I'm not too sure. But he has a very adroit way of using words, and you can see it in his dialogue. You can see it in the way he describes certain things, and you can see it in the way he jumps from paragraphs to paragraphs, conveying certain ideas. That said, it's really not my type of story, man. It's a character exploration, and it is either Hemingway is speaking from personal experience, which means he's been through that sort of life, that very hedonistic, does nothing kind of life, where he feels he's wasting his life, or he is relating the biography of somebody he knows close. Either, or he's just got a very good grasp of the human condition, or at least the artistic condition, I suppose. And I will give him. I mean, it's done really well. It's just not something I'm interested in. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same, XJ. I know I can appreciate the skill involved, but at the same time, it's not my kind of story. Much prefer the Three Musketeers of Weird Tales, R.E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, and Clark Ashton Smith, and it's just one sign of how the world is, that it's Hemingway who got the Nobel Prize, and the Weird Tales writers would never in a million years get the Nobel Prize because their work is just not appreciated in the same kind of way.
Yeah, I guess I would just wear the tag of lowbrow really proudly on my chest. I am lowbrow. The Hemingway, this particular short story anyway, doesn't touch me in the least. I find I'm not drawn to the main character. I'm not drawn to Helen. I'm not drawn to the emotional exploration. Let's put it that way.
Would you be more drawn to the story if they were on a distant planet?
That's not
for,
that's not strictly true, because there are dramatic stories that had nothing of that sort happening that I really like. The most powerful film I've ever watched is Grave of the Fireflies, and that is really sad. I would put it as the best movie I've ever watched, and I've only watched it once. I can't make myself sit through it a second time.
Oh yeah, I know those type of movies.
Yeah. I also really like the Joker, the one with Joaquin Phoenix. And anyone thinking it's a superhero movie is badly mistaken. It's not. It's basically a dramatic story.
Sure.
But
what I was more trying to get at was what would need to change for it to be more enjoyable for you?
I'm not at all drawn to stories where the character does a lot of exploration of his emotions and then does nothing. Like to me that is just very goes nowhere. It's just like it just keeps circling. Maybe kind of like a day for you, Nikki. Just keep circling. I like where is this story going, man? Like, okay, fine. You the character is exploring this, is very deeply affected, traumatized by whatever event, and then he's or circumstances of his birth or whatever, and then he's like really feeling it. There's all this internal monologue going on, all this depth, all this anger, this sadness, this sorrow, and then what is he doing about it? I like my stories the way I like life. I have no time for people who talk a lot and does nothing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is one of the best advices you could ever get. Robert, please. What were you saying?
You're not into futility, XJ. That's the thing.
Yes, I'm not into futility. Exactly.
Yeah.
Same question to you, Robert. What would need to change in the story in order for it to be more enjoyable for you?
It would need to get more colourful. Actually, futility is right as long as it's colourful, and as long as there's a picturesque aspect to it. Also, I don't. This is another point. I don't particularly go for Hemingway's ultra plain style. I can see the point of it. He leaves out he leaves out adverbs almost entirely. He's very sparing with the adjectives. Um, I see the point of that. There's a certain clarity that you gain from doing that, a certain purity you gain. But on the other hand, you you renounce a great part of the resources of the English language if you
Mm.
limit yourself in that way. And I like long words, as people who know me will uh, vouch for. And I
Does that
like,
mean you like German words? Is that the kind of
yeah,
long?
yeah. Donau
Oh boy.
Dampfschiff als Kapitän Stellvertreter Gemahlin, for example. Um, yeah, I like that's why I like Clark Hession Smith and H.P. Lovecraft. I like their luxurious, abundant style, especially Smith. Lovecraft can go a bit off sometimes in his less good stories. But yeah, all this is by the way. I just don't think that I could read a whole Hemingway novel. I think I would get bored. Although I'd admire it, but I'd still get bored.
All right. So I've reserved to say anything about the story for a little bit. And although I've argued on some points, they were clearly pedantic. And I find it interesting that what's it called? I started as a man who fought pedantic tendencies on the podcast, and now I've realized that I am now part of your circle.
Welcome
Um,
to welcome to hell.
Thank you, thank you. It's really warm here. I like it. So this story is very similar to The Hero. The another work that we read before on this podcast. There's futility, there's the struggle, and then in the end, the hero dies without really changing anything. In fact, his death is in the hero. It's even less than meaningless because then his death is used to do the exact opposite of what he wanted, of a more quiet life. It is instead used as propaganda to heat up the war in which he was a part of. And here,
Hmm.
it is just meaningless, right? So it's not even, it's just meaningless. He just dies, right? That's the end of it. Um, I didn't particularly much like the story. Let's put it that way. Hemingway's writing can be very powerful. The Old Man and the Sea, I think it's called, or I must be butchering the name because it's called different in Russian, and I read it in Russian. But that tale is really, really, really sad, and the sadness of it elevates it into high art. Honestly, tremendous how sad it makes you feel, and I'll never read it again. Just like XJ will never watch that movie. I found the whole story meaningless. While um, the points raised philosophically are interesting, just like in Highlands, uh, they fall flat for me exactly for the same reason because they're just said over and over and over again. And after the third time that or like second time even, after the second time on the third go of the same point being raised of like, oh, I could have been a better author, or I could have wrote all those stuff down. And like, yeah, it's interesting to see all these memorabilia in interesting places of history. To me, probably because I like history. But even I can't stomach the same stuff dressed in different outfits presented to me like it's a new paragraph. where, in my opinion, it's not. It's the same point. The story could have been way shorter. The story could have been about a different theme or a collection of themes, but instead, I think it suffers from the fact that the theme itself is depressing, and further exploration all of it stops being exploration and starts becoming repetition. And this repetition is what kills the Snow of Kilimanjaro for me. Where at the end I was like, okay, die already, Harry. Just just go. He wants some he wants to drink and she's giving him soup. Okay, whatever. Right, he's gonna die. No, okay. And then I thought Hemingway was gonna do something interesting about it. Because Harry is like, he wakes up the next morning and he's gonna be taken to safety, and he's gonna have to live with this new profound things that he found. He flies over the snows of Kilimanjaro, right? The sky is the limit. Look at these beautiful mountains. Oh no, he's dead. So you've this last twist that you've created in the story, while on the surface maybe, you know, good in the sense that it subverted my expectations. The subversion of my expectations that the guy actually gets to live is way better. He has to live with all of these discoveries, that he maybe has to become a better human being, and seeing a little bit more of that might have saved the story. But instead, he just gets to die. And that's it. It's over. It's meaningless. There you go.
Yeah, there could be a hint if one didn't know Hemingway was a completely non-religious person, that you could read the end of the story as a hint that, as a description of what the early stages of death is like. In other words, that you leave the body and you get taken on a trip of some sort. But I don't think that was the intention.
That's an interesting point that you raised, because I was thinking about some supernatural aspect that could be read into if you really squint your eyes, with the hyena and how it sort of like walks around and pushes its paws onto his chest, and there's that whole thematic symbolism with the hyena itself. But you know, it's even more of a stretch than my previous analysis, which XJ rightly put down. You know, about like trying to make Harry more than he is, because that's a I think we've realized this by now. My brain likes complexity, and if I can make it more complex, I'm gonna find it more fascinating. Like with the Hearts, Lost Hearts, sorry, story. Where both of you were adamant that there are no culprits, and these culprits are not, you know, like they're just happenstances, victims. And I was hammering the point of like, no, the story becomes way worse if they're not accomplices, if they don't know what's happening, because then you've got this layer. It's similar here. I wanted to add layers to Harry's character in some instances, and I do believe that some of them, at least shadows of them, do exist, but not at the extent that I've created at the beginning of the podcast.
So I have a question for you, Nikki. Does Harry as a character seem compelling at all to you? Is he like well done? Is he like not necessarily a good character that you root for, but is he a compellingly written character to you?
Helen is. I'll answer thusly at the first, right? I think Helen is a person who I can get behind, not just morally, but also she's proactive, and I want to see her succeed, right? So Hemingway got me there. I'm on Helen's team when it comes to, you know, saving somebody. But and maybe cleverly, Hemingway makes me care about Harry through Helen, because Helen wants him to be alive so much. I sometimes forget how much of an asshole he is. And when it comes to Harry, I think Harry is a very real person. Let's put it that way. As you said, you know, I could imagine individuals being like him in the real world. These hedonistic people that sort of go from one place to the other, wreaking havoc and chaos, and sometimes beautiful things happen, but it's mostly reductive and destructive. I think he is missing two things to be a truly like fully rounded character. While he has remorse, he only has remorse because it affects him in the end, right? So his selfishness is never expanded to truly caring for anything, right? And you'd never have individuals who have nothing to care for besides themselves unless they are sociopaths. So if he's a sociopath, then okay, fair enough. But even dictators have stuff that they like, dogs, their wife, so on and so forth.
You mean something that humanizes them, and
Yeah,
nothing,
exactly.
and nothing about Harry humanizes him to you.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a very concise way to put it. And then the second thing I think that he's missing from being a character that's fully rounded is probably his uncompelling reasoning that he keeps living. Because if he, in real life, if somebody has given up on life so much, they don't live very long, and he lives through an entire day, right? So there's no real fight in him. So to me, that just kind of felt false. It felt wrong that he keeps living. It didn't make sense to me. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my answer. I also want to say that the Snows of Kilimanjaro has points in it which are very fascinating and interesting, and the parts that I didn't find fascinating or interesting, I probably didn't find them so because they were just a repeat of the first part, right? So individually, I think if we were to take the scar apart and take each part, we would say that each one is immaculately made, but put together, it just doesn't work, right? That's the way I would describe it.
There's something self-conscious about the story or about the act of writing such a story. I think it's like Hemingway is sort of patting himself on the back as he's writing it. I know that's a bizarre thing to say, but in
Like,
a
at least
story,
I'm not Harry, or what is
well,
the...
he's sort of saying, look, this is my skillful way of writing about a story about somebody who's uh, really not worth writing about. And therefore, since he's not worth writing about, and since the whole thing's futile, the reader, can do nothing except admire the skill with which I'm putting into this. Whereas if the story did have a positive meaning, then you'd be admiring the meaning rather than just the author's skill with words. You see
what
what I
I
mean?
Mhm.
Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
What I do admire about the story is the fact that there's sexuality in it. There's talk of these things that in a lot of fiction is missing, but ultimately, sex is part of life, and it is, at least to me, portrayed pretty realistically from Harry's point of view, from the way he sees and views sex, as a point of power. Um, I that is. Not because I think more works should have the stuff. It's just that I seldom see any mention of such things in works. So I found that I would use the word refreshing.
Mm, mm.
The fact that it's there.
I just think that
Hmm.
um, the discussion about this story, it's very difficult, like I said at the beginning, to keep it just about the story. It ends up, there's a powerful force pushing it towards being a discussion about the meaning of life and about philosophy and so on, because I really don't think that Hemingway's view of life or the character's view of life, I simply think it's so inadequate it's just pitiful.
Hmm. He's an animal.
Yeah.
He's an animal, the same animals that he hunts, the same animals that Helen kills in the story. Um, Perhaps that's a great theme that should have been maybe explored a bit more. Him in his own mind comparing himself to animals and him seeing that as a strength. That look at me, I'm a proud lion. But us as the viewers thinking like, no, you're just a lion, right? It's that like you're humanizing a lion. We are dehumanizing you as we're reading this, right? As I've asked you, I'll answer my own question, right? Like how I could make this more enjoyable. I mean, obviously making it on a different planet. Come on, guys. I mean, why didn't you support me on that one? I don't understand. No, if I am honest,
It's
um,
not that I didn't support you. I think it would definitely make it better if there's pew-pews in it.
thank you, thank you.
But
All right.
I'm just saying, it's not necessary.
The amount of restraint you have is admirable. So pew pews now.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah. Pew-pews make everything better.
it's
It's a
true.
bit like sugar, you know?
Well, too much of it can make you sick.
That's
Uh,
true. We saw that in Two Kinds of Fools.
oh God! All right, here we go again. I like that story. All right, I'll defend it to my dying heart, just because to me, it's like the perfect amount of sugar. It's like the
Really? That's
sugariest of.
okay. Okay, fair enough.
If if on one condition, it's my birthday. Okay, that's
Okay,
when it's
sure.
perfect amount of sugar. Right?
Okay.
That's the way I would have praise. Anyway,
So, how many birthdays do you have in a year?
well, plenty. And, you know, soon pretty more if I keep eating. Um, so how I would make it. I would first start with Harry getting the injury. I wouldn't start with them talking about it. I would start with him getting the injury and ignoring it. Because that's such a powerful moment. And that the fact that it's off screen is scandalous. And the fact that we don't get to see Harry before he has contemplations of death is also a huge missed opportunity. Because we don't see transition from the man he used to be to the man he is right now. Right? And the man he is right now is, while fascinating, if we don't know how he used to be, it's meaningless. That's the first way I would change the story. Secondly, I would definitely unpuzzle all of these scenes where Hemingway is trying to give meaning to words on a page, and perhaps he had meaning for it, okay? But it is so undecipherable and so nebulous when it comes to these memories that they literally seem to serve no purpose besides gallivanting across the world and showing us Hemingway's knowledge of where is what and why, right? So undeciphering these pieces into powerful moments, similar to this Tower of Ashes, where we go through this journey with our protagonist, Johnny, and each moment of him contemplating against CNB. What did we call him? CNB, right? That was the name of the boyfriend.
Yes.
And Crystal. When the two of them have their differences with Johnny, they have reflection on what the story is about, on symbolism within the story. Here, there's a lot of symbolism, but there's not a lot of connection, or apparent connection at least. Perhaps I'm just stupid, but for me, there's no connection between these dreams. They mean nothing. They don't have a beautiful way tying into the story. So you know.
I don't.
Fix
So
this.
so first, let me just interrupt.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
think, I don't think it's you, Nikki. You're not stupid.
Oh,
I some artists are so caught up with themselves that they
Show off.
make all this, well, they show off, but also they make all these internal connections inside their head that make sense to them but makes sense to nobody else. It's like an ego trip for them when they write their stuff. And yeah, those kind of stories I have no patience with. Like I don't understand your internal landscape, and I have no interest in knowing your internal landscape, because who is the author to me? Yeah.
Indeed.
It's very the word I wanted to use is very self-indulgent.
Beautiful words. Speaking of self-indulgency, that's the last thing I would fix. And perhaps the most important. And that is the self-indulgent ending. Because, okay, to me, at least, the way it seems, the Helen and the beating of her heart and how she reminisces and how it anguishes her about, Harry's Day, while not unrealistic, to end on that point. So is the story is meaning that even you're a complete douchebag and you destroy your life, there's still going to be a beautiful young woman screaming for the fact that you died? I get the feeling that if what Robert is saying is true, that there are a lot of autobiographical things in the story, which I don't know much about Hemingway in details. I know a lot about him in passing, that he was a drunkard, that he used fisticuffs, that he himself was an explorer in many ways, shape, or form, and that he lived a hedonistic lifestyle. I know these facts, but I don't know the the kernels, the little pieces of all of it being interconnected in facts, right? I just know the overview. But if what Robert says is true, then this is basically Hemingway writing a scene at the end, thinking that when he dies, some beautiful young woman is going to be screaming about the fact that he's dead.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is not autobiographical in some way. Like typically when an author gets into so much detail about the internal landscape of a character, either they know somebody like that really well, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, or they've been through that same thing and they're writing about themselves. And yeah, I'm not adverse to that kind of writing, because it does make certain characters more real. But when the entire story is about that, then I have nothing to say except that it's an ego trip, basically. Yeah.
Right. So I guess you agree on me then.
Absolutely. I guess. Hey, you know what I just realized?
What?
This is probably the first podcast when we all agree that the story sucks.
We waited for it since episode 11 when Robert was saying like, "Oh, we really need a stinker." And now,
the thing is that this story probably isn't a stinker. It's a very masterfully written story. It's just nobody cares.
No, that's right.
Well,
I think it would,
go on, Robert.
it would benefit, for example, this is taking place in Africa, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it would benefit, for example, if there were a guest appearance somewhere in the story by Tarzan.
Yeah, I would totally go with that.
I mean,
He had a more positive outlook on life. He would teach Harry.
My vote would go to Kimba, but Tarzan
Kimba?
works too.
Okay. All right. Here's my version of the events. Right. So secretly, it is Tarzan's hyena that's been harrowing Harry, right? And this whole it's a darkly spirit that Tarzan is throwing at this person because they're destroying Africa, so he should suffer for it. And then through a time loop, as Helen is
So a kind of more dark and vengeful Tarzan. I can get behind that.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay. So how could we make this story better? We could have written Harry coming in, shooting left and right, or all the beautiful animals on the plains, and then Tarzan got angry. And then he starts sending his how did the story establish how he got his injury?
Yes, there was a thorn in a bush that he scraped against, and he didn't put iodine on it.
Right. So Tarzan, instead of sticking to his barbarian class, he became a druid, and then he summoned.
He conjured up these bushes. Yeah. Okay, I understand. All right, but the most important part is the ending, right? So because we need to bait for a sequel. So as Helen is basically defending Harry's soon to be grave with a stick as the unit comes over, a time loop like in the Twonky zooms out, and an axe comes out and cuts the hyena in half, and the half roboticized Conan comes out, and he says, "We must save Harry."
Okay, well, that's a little bit too much of a crossover. I never really liked crossovers.
No, I love crossovers.
Really? I mean, it's fun, but it's not something I want all my stories to have.
That's true. That's true.
It can
well,
get.
we never
it can
had
get,
a crossover.
I mean, it can get a little bit. I mean, crossovers, you have to do it properly, right? Because otherwise, it can just be like really stupid.
Well, let me explain my story, my idea behind this. The reason I'm introducing Conan at the end.
So there's a fight between Tarzan and Conan.
That's right. Exactly.
I would pay money to read that comic. Yeah,
exactly.
for sure.
So what we've basically said is Kilimanjaro is pouring as hell, and we need Tarzan and Conan to come in to save it.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I don't think there's much more we can say about the story, unfortunately. Well, I'm like wrung dry. It's just really boring to me.
That's right. I agree with you. And it's beautiful to see that we all agree on something.
It's the human condition. We can all agree when somebody sucks.
That's true. Unless it's two kinds of fool, because I'll defend that story for the rest of my life.
Again, not saying it's a bad story. It's just a little bit too much for me. It's not much.
Too much sugar.
Yeah, too much sugar for me. Not that I dislike the cake. If you get what my meaning. Like, yeah, I like cheesecake, but if the cheesecake had too much cheese,
never too much cheese. Give it to me.
Okay, sure.
Give me just the icing, and I'll eat it. So, last point that I want to raise about the story and Hemingway in general is that while in this story, his female character is not treated well by Harry, she's still a very realistic person, and I think that she is showcased capable, and she's showcased to be smart, even though Harry tries his best to lead the reader and if you were listening to this as an audiobook, the listener, into thinking that she's not as good as she actually is. And I think she's actually much smarter than Harry in the end, and much more eloquent. And the fact that she has chosen to spend time with Harry says more about her than it says about him, because he believes himself to be this irresistible macho man that is just like, amazing.
This might be the one and only time that I defend Harry.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I don't think he thinks of himself as a macho man. I think it's very clear how he got. I think it's very clear what his where his charisma comes from. It comes from when he doesn't care anymore. Like when he's really into the woman, he screws everything up. When he doesn't care about the woman, then the women in his life that he has become involved in became drawn to him. And I think there's some truth to that, because when I think this is true of all, not just between men and women, but of all people, when you start becoming, when you like somebody so much that you just say yes to everything, then
They get bored.
they get bored. Plus, you become a cardboard of a character. There's like nothing else do you accept the pampering. And I think like humans in general need some sort of pushback from somebody to feel like that person is real.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Harry's thing is not so much that he thinks he has a lot of charisma. It's just that he swings so wildly from one side to the other. Like he either goes all in and becomes what we call in modern parlance a simp, or he becomes a complete asshole. That's basically it.
Well, I can't believe that I am against the entire human race, as it seems.
No, not really.
I'd much rather hold on. I'd much rather prefer person being constantly nice, and there would be no pushback at all.
Well, I mean, it's not about not being constantly nice. It's more about setting boundaries, like you can be very nice, somebody can be very nice and all that, but when the occasion calls for it, that person must be able to say no. Like I would just use, since we're on World War II and Nazis, we can use that example. You could be very nice and say yes to everything and very law-abiding and obedient, but when the government says we're going to round these people up and put them into concentration camps, do you say no at that point? Yeah. And it takes I'm not saying people should do that or they will do that. It's a very difficult thing to do when everyone else around you is doing the same thing. It's very, very difficult to stand up and say no. But there's got to be some internal boundary, and that changes with everyone. Everybody has a different boundary. But once that boundary is crossed, you have to be able to stand up and push back, is basically what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're coming up to an hour. So thankfully, we can put this story behind us and just pretend we never read it. Okay. Any last words?
2 out of 10.
You, Rob?
I'd give it 10 out of 10 for writing skill and 0 out of 10 for point.
So 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
So
might as well not have been written, as far as I'm concerned.
I think
end thread, basically, end podcast.
Drop the mic. That was amazing, Robert. I think that's such a beautiful point that you just made. That might as well not have been written.
Yeah.
That is.
Yes, chef's kiss, man.
Beautiful. Yeah. I have to agree. It has no point. It's meaningless. Therefore, why is it here?
Yeah. Well, I have pretty much the same take as Rob. I would give it 9 out of 10. Because there really is nothing to say about the craftsmanship. It's superb.
Yeah.
Just
technically, it's
technically,
perfect.
yeah. Well, I would only pick it up if somebody forced me to, which in this case, yes.
You know what I found crazy? There's a movie adaptation of this.
I guess some people are into that sort of stuff. I guess I'm just not me. I'm not the audience.
I might give it a watch, like the first maybe 10-15 minutes, just to see what did they do with this.
Nikki,
yeah,
don't torture yourself.
Wow.
Well, you never know.
It is enjoyable at certain points.
It might be good. You never know.
Well, actually, I disagree with you on this, XJ. I'll make this point very quickly so we can all
Put this
do our
behind us
stuff.
and go do something
Yeah,
else more
exactly.
interesting. Okay,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Hit me.
So Alan Moore, an author I admire, said once that don't just read good stories, because then all you will be doing as an author, then all you will be doing is trying to be like them and sort of trying to be chasing the good stuff. Read bad stories, watch bad movies, do all that stuff so that you can see exactly where they go wrong and don't do that, and analyze why did they go wrong, and you will learn a lot more that way.
Absolutely. Except, you know what? I don't think Alan Moore would think Hemingway is a bad writer.
Yeah, well, even a good writer can have a bad story.
Actually,
I
I
know.
don't. Actually, I don't know. Maybe Alan Moore thinks Hemingway is a terrible writer.
Why do we call him up?
Yeah,
He's
Alan
still
Moore. Do you want to answer this?
Okay.
All right.
Let's.
I guess that's about it.
Yep.
Really nothing else to talk about, to be honest. So, thank you for sitting through this with us. If you like Hemingway, we're sorry but not sorry. You like what you like, but we also like what we like, unfortunately. And
It's been an interesting discussion anyway.
yes.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us your attention. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye bye.